Yes. Okay. So, hello everyone. I'm very happy that so many of you have joined. Very, very cool. I hope everyone sees the presentation. Yeah, so some words about me. Yeah, my name is Michael. I'm based in Germany, in Munich. And yeah, well, basically I started flight simming in summer 2017, and a few months after I joined VATSIM as a pilot first, and then pretty quickly as a controller, thanks to Nikrativ, by the way. He helped me to sign up for the correct group. So yeah, I'm controlling in the Munich sphere on VATSIM, yeah, because it's the airport I'm pretty close to. Yeah, so today, I want to give an introduction how VATSIM actually works and some other things. Yeah, and if you have questions of any kind about procedures, how to communicate on the frequency whatsoever, please just put them into the workshop questions and I will be happy to answer them. Alrighty, then how to VATSIM, an introduction into online flying. Right, yeah, what is VATSIM? VATSIM is one of currently 3 online flying networks for flight simulation. The other one is IVEO, and then there's also the paid service Pilot's Edge. Based on their website, in 2018 they had over 79,000 active members. The cool thing about VATSIM, it's free of charge, so you don't have to pay anything. You basically just need your simulator. On VATSIM, you can either be a pilot, a virtual pilot, or even a virtual ATC. And VATSIM currently is available for Explain 9, 10, 11, and all the FSX like P3D, FS9, FS2004, and so on. Okay, so how do you actually get started on VATSIM? Well, the first thing, of course, you need an account. So you can follow this link and create an account. You basically will get a pilot ID and a password, and that's what you need to connect to the network. Then, of course, you need a flight simulator, but I guess all of you already have one. Then you need a piece of software which is called a pilot client. This basically takes care that A, you hear the controllers and they hear you. You can use it for model matching so that you see the other traffic on the network, and it submits all the data of your client into the network, like your current heading, altitude, speed, etc. The main 2 pilot clients, the first one is called vPilot, so it's also for FSX, P3D, and so on. It's free of charge, and it's still actively developed. I use it myself. I really, really like it. It has a very clean interface, so works like a charm. And for Explain, you can use XQuarkBox. I don't like it that much. Problem is that it's integrated into the sim, so you can't move the window out of the simulator like with vPilot. So it gets a little bit cramped. There's also a new client that was recently released. It's called Swift. It's available for all simulators, and it's also running in a separated window. I haven't tried it out myself, so can't really judge on it. So when you have installed this, you maybe need some models. So for example, you're spawning at the airport and right to use an A320, but you see a CRJ, for example. That's not right. And there are 2 great free resolutions for that. The first one is called Fly. It's from the Boss 10 ATC group on VATSIM. So they basically gathered a lot of different 3D models and a lot of liveries for these models, and you can use it in conjunction with vPilot to create your model matching, so that when you fly, when someone flies a Lufthansa A320, you see it as a Lufthansa A320 in your simulator. For Explain, there's something called Bluebell, which works with XQuarkBox. Yeah. Then, well, so a headset, please. Why please? VATSIM has something called a code of conduct. It's basically the rules, the behavior, how you should present yourself on the network. It's allowed to fly as a text pilot. There's no problem with that. So if you feel uncomfortable talking and don't want to listen because you're watching Netflix or something, you can use the text chat. The problem with text pilots, Yeah, it's hard for us controllers. I mean, in our software, we have some shortcuts to write stuff like clearances or ILS clearances, etc. But it takes time. And there are some people that can't talk, of course. There are also some deaf controllers that use text. For these kind of persons, no problem at all. But yeah, if you have a headset, give it a try. It adds a lot to the immersion on VATSIM, and it makes the life of the controllers a lot easier. The next thing you should definitely have is charts. Once again, please. You can either use Navigraph or the Aerosoft charts if you prefer Lido. In Germany, for example, we provide you with charts free of charge. You can download them as PDF. Of course, it's not as fancy as Navigraph. It's not that much integrated, but we try to keep them up to date. And the cool thing about these charts is they are open source then, because of course you can't just share Navigraph charts. Jeppesen has the copyright on it, and they will get very angry if you do so. Okay, if you managed to do all of this, you can start basically your first flight. So my first flight took me to Boston, and I was basically sitting on the ground for 2 hours because I was so nervous to ask for my clearance, because I was thinking I can't remember it at all. I finally was convinced to send a flight plan, and a few minutes later I got a private message with a pre-departure clearance, and I just had to call in for pushback. So that was really nice. I then did my flight. I think I flew to JFK. Yeah, was interesting, but yeah, I was super nervous, so there's no problem at all to be nervous when you start on VATSIM. It's a little bit overwhelming in the beginning, but you get used to it, and then it's a lot of fun. Yeah, so the first hurdle on VATSIM, especially for beginners, is most of the time is the call sign. So how do you name yourself when you connect? There are different options you have. So the first one is any ICAO conform call sign. So that basically means every airline has a 3-letter designator. For example, we have Lufthansa, which is DLH, or American Airlines, which is Alpha Alpha Lima, and many others. If you're part in a virtual airline, for example, our beloved one-engine out airline, you can use Oscar Echo Oscar. The software we use has a list of mappings. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of different call signs flying on VATSIM. I can't remember all of them. So when we click on an airplane, we get a small text on the bottom that basically decodes the call sign to the decodes the 3-letter code to the real call sign. And as Windmill, for one engine out, for example, is a partner airline of VATSIM, I actually see Windmill down there. But please don't do stuff like LH123 and then call yourself Lufthansa or stuff like that. I mean, it works, but don't be mad if you call your Lima Hotel 123 then, for example. The next option is you can use the aircraft registration. That's something I normally do when I fly a VFR, because then, of course, you don't really fly as an airline. So in the US, there are this common November 711 Bravo Bravo things. In Germany, it's based on the weight of the aircraft. So when I fly VFR, I normally Delta Echo Charlie Oscar Mike, which is a 1 propeller aircraft below 2 tons takeoff weight. So all of these options work. The next really important thing is you have to use the right type code. So when you fly an Airbus A320, you type in A320. If you fly an A319, you type in A319. If you fly a Boeing 737-800, Bravo 738. Then, for example, if you fly the 777 cargo variant, there's no such thing as Bravo 77 Foxtrot. This doesn't exist. It's Bravo 77 Lima, because that's the designator for the 200 variant, which the freighter is based on. And why is this important? There is a thing called wake turbulence categories. It basically tells you how much separation different kind of aircraft need. There are 4 I think. There's light, medium, heavy, and super. Super is only for the A380 and this big Antonov cargo plane. And we need to know that as a controller. So when you log in, please use the right one. The A320neo, for example, I've seen this many times. That doesn't exist. Okay, so you're now logged in with a correct call sign, with a correct type code. Now you need a route. In the beginning, I used this thing from Aerosoft, this super bad one. I can't remember it. The routes I get from there were horrible. So I basically use SimBrief every day. SimBrief is great. It has some problems here and there, but if you're aware of them, then yeah, you can just overrule them and do your own thing. SimBrief is free of charge, works like a charm. It's now also integrated into Navigraph. They have a cool download extension for your PC. So every time you file a flight plan there, or create one, I should say, it downloads into the right directories, for example, into your PMDG route directory. For the FSLabs, it puts it in the right directory, and so on. It's very convenient, and yeah, I use it a lot. Okay, then you have to file your flight plan. Depending on the client you use, there's like an input box which looks slightly different. Yeah, so you have a departure airport and an arrival airport. Just use the 4-letter ICAO code for that. So, for example, if you fly from Dresden to Leipzig, you use Echo Delta Delta. SimBrief normally takes care of that. I mean, if you want to go crazy, check the weather, plan it more thoughtfully, but normally the one SimBrief offers you is good enough. The next thing is you have to put in a cruising altitude. That varies from country to country. So in Germany, for example, if you fly eastbound, it's an odd level. If you fly westbound, it's an even level. But then there are also some airways in the sky which switch this. So for example, a lot of Lufthansa flights from Berlin to Munich, they're heading west, but they still flag odd flight level, I think. So yeah, it can get a little bit complicated. It's not so important. Normally, the center controller will tell you, I need you on an odd flight level. Yeah, a good rule of thumb I always use is basically in SimBrief, have a look at the ground distance. So for example, if it's 250 miles, then you can climb flight level 250. If it's shorter, so I always correlate the distance with the cruising level. That works out pretty well. The next thing is the equipment code. So that basically tells, so they also use it in real life, it basically tells what kind of transponder your aircraft has and which information it can send to the controllers. In Euroscope, so the software I use, or a lot of us use for controlling, it changes some things. So for example, if someone has a L as his equipment code, I can see his true heading and his true airspeed. Of course, I could see this for every airplane, because yeah, you can just enable it for everyone, but we want to keep it a little bit realistic. So planes that have these newer transponders, yeah, we simulate that. So yeah, if you fly an A320 or the whole family of it, you can put an L. It's not so important for you, but more important for the controllers. Then you have to put in your route you got from SimBrief. You put your SID and your star, and then all the waypoints and airways separated by spaces. Please don't put stuff like Echo Delta Delta Mike SID anchor in your route. That's not your route. Your route is the SID, the waypoints, and the star. There's no such thing as the departure airport. Please don't separate them by dots. I've seen flight plans from Munich to Los Angeles with dots, and then I need to spend like 5 minutes to delete all the dots. That's not very helpful. Okay, how do you actually figure out?
I can just quickly hold on. So before we go on, are there any questions regarding up to now, guys? I've been trying to answer questions here in the chat, in the workshop questions channel. Yeah, SimBrief, Kleptrick, you said that the root, etc., and the suffix for the equipment there is the option to file your flight plan through SimBrief. So you can actually, if you scroll down after you've generated the flight plan, if you scroll down, you will find the text or the field for the downloads into all the different simulator files. And there's also right at the bottom, there's a possibility to file your flight plan directly through SimBrief, either on VATSIM or on Pilot Edge. Now, if you do that, you don't have to file it per se, but if you click on that, you will have the VATSIM flight plan filled out for you, and you will see the correct equipment suffix, for example, on there, and also the correct coding of your routing, etc., which you could just simply copy out, etc. So yeah, that really helps. I don't know how many people actually knew that.
I don't use it. The only reason I don't use it, I have to type my VATSIM username and password all the time I click on submit, and I got a little bit tired of it. So
okay, so yeah, so that's, like I said, you don't have to really file it per se, but at least you get the the printout regarding things like suffix and the aircraft type, the routing, etc. That really helps.
Yeah, for the people recommending saving passwords in the browser, no, that's not a safe thing. They're not encrypted, so I mean, it's just your VATSIM password, but still, I know that's very convenient, but that's just some personal reasons. I don't want to do that. Okay. But yeah.
All right, so let's see. So fitting it. Okay. Yeah, so the difference between VATSIM and Pilot Edge is that on Pilot Edge you don't insert the departure routes and the stars. So sits and stars are not included in the flight plan for Pilot Edge. But yes, VATSIM does have that.
It doesn't really matter on VATSIM. Like, you can put it there, and you can also leave it out and roll everything around your side.
Okay. Well, I always wondered because sometimes runway systems change, etc., etc. So you might get a different clearance anyway regarding your sit and star.
If somebody gives me, I'm controlling Helsinki, and somebody puts a SID for runway 04 right, I'm using 22 right for departure. I'm just gonna silently change SID and not tell the pilot. I'm just gonna give it a new SID on the clearance. And...
Okay.
That's also something worth mentioning. When you fly on VATSIM, there are, of course, you fly in many different countries, and there is no common procedure. So like I flew to Austria the last time, and I didn't file my star. Yeah, I just didn't. And then the controller didn't clear me on the star. And close to my clearance limit, which I thought, and asked the controller if I'm cleared for the star. And then he told me, yeah, you're always cleared for the star as you filed it. I told him I didn't file the star at all. Okay, but I assumed you did. So okay. It's difficult. I mean, just file it and then see what happens. Because like every country has some slightly different procedures, and there's no common answer to say you always have to do it like this, because it might be completely different in Finland than in Germany, or I don't know. So yeah.
Okay, so somebody at Max asked, let's say you have runway 09 and runway 27, winds are 145.20. Which runway would you land at? The runway with the most crosswind, the most tailwind, the most headwind? Now, I guess I'll answer that from my point of view. Obviously, from the pilot point of view, you always want to land on a runway that has a headwind component. You are allowed to land with 10 knots of tailwind component, and there's runway systems like Nice, for example, where obviously they will accept 5-knot tailwind component for a landing runway before they change. You're just going to have to stick with what ATC gives you and what it says on the ATIS. If there is no control online, then obviously aim for the runway that has the headwind component. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Munich, for example, we have preferred runway direction, so the runways heading to the to the west, are more preferred. So it can happen that the wind actually blows into an eastern direction, but you're still, the wind blows in a western direction and you're still landing west because the tailwind is so slow. But that really depends. What I do when I fly to an uncontrolled airport, I just check Flight Radar 24. Because I always think in real life they have way better weather information ahead. You can check, of course, that the TAF if you want. But yeah, I normally check flight radar and go with that.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's also good point. Yeah, check flight radar. Then you use. Then you know exactly what runways are in use. Okay, cool. Robbie, regarding the ICAO, IFR, VFR level rules, be aware that there are airway systems that actually use the opposite level. So they don't use the odd and even level rule. They might have a different rule for that. So be careful. With using those tables.
Yeah, a good example for is so when you fly into Switzerland, for example, and you're flying west, so you're on an even flight level. In the middle of the country, that's what changes because France uses a reverse system for whatever reason. So in the middle of the country, the center controller will most likely change your flight level. It's very, very hard to be super precise about how you should fly the flight level. So most of the time, I just leave it to the controller because it's ridiculous to figure this out on your own if you don't have a dispatch.
yeah, exactly. And I think it is important for VFAR flying, definitely, because if you're not under control, you're flying VFAR, then those semicircular rules are very important. Absolutely. But for IFR flying, I don't really, worry about it. I just look at the flight plan, what my dispatcher has filed, or if I do SimBrief, let's say, I'm filing something. If the controller is not happy with that, he will tell you. He will let you know.
Yeah. Also keep in mind that I heard from some real life VFR pilots, they always fly a little bit lower and a little bit higher to don't get in contact with pilots that don't actually know what they are doing, and then they get yelled at by the info controller and stuff like that. So
Okay.
On VATSIM, stick to the rules because there's nothing can happen.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so if there's no other questions at the moment, we will continue.
I can quickly answer MCK's questions. Yes, so as controllers, we normally limit how high you can climb. For example, Frankfurt Tegel, it doesn't make sense to fly 350, so we would limit you. That doesn't necessarily happen with the clearance. The reason is simply, I will talk about this later as well, is that a delivery controller doesn't know all the rules yet because he just started. So, for example, a really common flight for us in Munich is Munich-Innsbruck, and people file like ridiculous flight levels like 360, and then we just clear them 130 and tell them it's the final level. I quickly interrupt because some people want to join. Okay, so let's continue. How do you figure out the SID? So once again, this is a topic that's super dependent on the airport, on the country, but yeah, let's try to figure out a rule of thumb, a kind of rule of thumb. So the first thing, of course, you have to know which runway is active. As we already discussed, if ATC is online, they normally have an ATIS where it's where they have an active runway provided. If it's uncontrolled, you can check flight radar. So once you know that, you have a look at your flight plan. So this is a flight plan, for example, from Dresden, Echo Delta Delta Charlie to Echo Delta Delta Papa. So the first waypoint is called BBEX. Let's say in Dresden, the active runway at the moment is 22. Well, then you open your Navigraph or whatever program and basically search for all the BBEX SIDs. And then you find a chart which normally has a BBEX SID for both directions, so for runway 22 and 04. And then you see, BBEX 7 Whiskey is the one that takes off runway 22. Yeah, bingo, you find your correct set. That always doesn't work. So for example, in Munich, we handle it like this. If you depart from the northern runway, so when your first waypoint is in the north of the airport, you always depart from the northern runway. If your first waypoint is in the south of the airport, then you depart from the southern runways. When you fly cargo, for example, because the cargo apron is basically on the southwest side of the airport, you normally always get the southern runway, else you would taxi like 10 minutes, and nobody wants that. So then this changes again. In Helsinki, so correct me if I'm wrong, they have a system where they have like initial waypoints that are spread out around the airport, and based on that you get your SID.
That has changed 2 years ago.
Okay, cool. Because I remember when I flew out the first time, I was highly confused. What I did after my flight, I checked the forum. So basically, each regional group on VATSIM has their own forum, and they also provide charts and procedures. And then I read about the system. But if it has not changed, perfect.
Yeah, it changed about 2 years ago, so it's now like a standard.
Okay.
So you have the waypoint and the SID takes you to those waypoints. There is no confusion.
All right. Okay.
A quick question, sorry, because people ask again. Just to clear up, so we are going from Nuremberg to Leipzig later on the flight.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Good.
Echo Delta Delta November to Echo Delta Delta Papa.
Thank you.
Okay. If you don't have any idea which SID you should expect, do the following. Remember which SIDs exist. So what I do, I find my first waypoint, let's say it's Anchor, and then I remember all the Anchor SIDs that exist. And then when I get the clearance via voice, I basically just remember the digit and the character at the end. So 7 whiskey, for example. And
you are completely unsure, there is nothing wrong by just messaging the ATC and asking what SID can I expect. I'm a new pilot or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's always the best rule. If in doubt, ask. Yeah, sure. But that's how I do it, because sometimes you don't understand it really. Did you just say it Akini or Anka? But you can figure it out most of the time. Yeah, with the stars, it's similar, complicated. Sure, you need the last waypoint on your route. You need the active runway. And then you can once again guess the arrival. Sometimes for the approach chart, so for example, are you taking the ILS 27 Zulu, Yankee, or X-ray? Most of the time, on top of the charts, there is something written like only use ILS 27 X-ray approaches, VOR XYZ is out of service, or only use it between 23 o'clock to 6 o'clock and stuff like that. So most of the time you end up with one approach you can fly. So either for RNAV, ILS, and so on and so forth. That normally works quite well. Just read the charts. Some airports have so-called transitions. That's pretty common in Germany, especially for the big airports. There it gets a little bit tricky. So in Munich, for example, in the north of the airport, we have a NDB called Mike India Quebec. And in the south, we have a VOR called Otterfingen, Oscar Tango Tango. They recently replaced it. It was called München VOR before, so great choice of naming. All stars end up on these 2 points, but you shouldn't fly them. So why? These points are only used for lost communication purposes. So if you somehow lose communication, you then continue there, flyer holding, wait a certain amount of time, and then you continue. In the reality, you will get cleared. So for example, if you come from Frankfurt, from the direction of Frankfurt flying to Munich, you will get your star and then cleared Rokiel 26 transition. So once again, before you fly or during cruise, please check all the charts, check if there are transitions, and just try to remember the names. And then when someone says Rokiel 26, you are, wait, I've seen this 5 minutes ago in my chart. Okay. And then you program it in. Both Boeing and Airbus support that. You can actually put in transitions. It's also quite easy, so yeah. To be honest, I don't know how you can figure out on your own if you have to fly in a transition or not. Maybe Blackbox can tell us something.
Well, unfortunately, it all comes down to experience. the important thing is to just understand that your clearance limit, or you have to know your clearance limit points. And that means, just like you said in Munich, you do not go beyond these points unless you get the transition clearance or radar vectors or whatever. You know, if you have the experience, if you've been to the airport before, you know exactly which transition you would probably get. But still, you always make sure you get the transition clearance before you continue past these clearance limit points.
Actually, I don't know if you have time, but I have because in Helsinki they changed this because of the clearance limit. It's a rather funny thing because like on the ILS clearance at the end of the star there is a fix, and then the ILS, if you're not clear to the ILS and the end of the star, there is no holding, so you don't know what to do. So now they actually changed all the stars in Helsinki about 2 months ago. So it all is everything's vector now. So if you reach your last waypoint, then it's a heading, and that's on all the stars nowadays. So they fixed that issue.
Yep. Quite often, if you look at the charts, in Munich, for example, on the transition, right at the end, it has this dotted error telling you, and quite often it'll say that in the text as well, to not follow the routing onto the final, but to maintain your last track. That can also happen, like Nikotiv says, on the arrival route itself. So the advice that I can give you from a pilot's point of view, you need to read the charts carefully, just like it says on the text on the top there. That's one of the really, really important things. Especially if there's an airport that you haven't been to before, or you haven't been to that airport for quite some time. Procedures change. Reading the airport information charts, reading the approach charts, departure charts, and so on. It's tedious, I know, but that's part of pilot life, and you just need to be so strict and so professional to do that, because the ATC controllers, they assume that you have read all the information, right? So if you suddenly do things against those infos, those regulations, then you're going to be told off. And it's the same, I hope and I assume, on VATSIM.
Yeah. To quickly answer Captain Dogstar, yes. So what I did in the beginning, I flew exclusively from Düsseldorf to Nuremberg and vice versa for almost a month. I then joined, of course, controlling, but I also had a lot of talks with the controllers. Did I messed up? What could I have done better, etc. Yeah. So getting familiar with an airport is super helpful. And to repeat black box, I can't stress it enough. Please be prepared when you fly. You normally have enough time in cruise to check the charts. And yeah, just do so. I mean, of course, you don't have to. Hey, it's VATSIM, nobody cares. But to keep this level of professionalism and also the immersion active, yeah, just be prepared as best as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, you have to realize you'll be flying on VATSIM events eventually. It's just like I did on my last stream, right, into Napoli. And we saw how, for whatever reason, right, things can get very chaotic. And it's a huge nuisance to a controller. It just binds so much of his workload and his capacity if you do not know your procedures, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with not knowing everything and maybe having a question, but if it's written on the chart, right, then the controller can assume that you've read it and that you know the procedure. And yeah, so again, be very, very strict on that topic.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, and we normally don't do this, but if it's super busy, I have to talk constantly on the frequency. There will be times where we'll just give you a vector and put you out of the sequence. So we do this quite often. We have a lot of space in Munich. So if you can't comply with the stuff we give you, we maybe put you in a holding or give you some delay vectors. I've seen this in JFK many times when they have fly-ins there on VATSIM. It's busy. It's so busy. It's crazy. There's basically no silence on the frequency, and if pilots can't comply, yeah, well, they're then out of the loop. Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit harsh, I should say, but really, I mean, don't forget, on VATSIM we control with a super low staff level. So in real life, any controller barely has more than 5 planes on the frequency at the same time. When I control Munich on a busy day, I can have 20 planes on the frequency at the same time. So I have to handle four times the workload of a real controller. Yeah, and there's a limit. And at one point, I mean, either you collapse, like not that you collapse on your chair, but you basically you can't handle the traffic anymore when everyone doesn't follow you anymore, or you have to put out some aircraft of the sequence. Yeah. If you're on a star and you have no idea what to fly, ask early, not 2 miles before your last point. That's very important. And if you can't figure it out at all, ask for vectors. But once again, please ask early enough. Don't fly the wrong way and then in the end, yeah, now I need vectors. If you don't know it, ask for vectors, but please ask early. Yeah, MCK, I will answer this in a bit. There is a slide coming up for that. It's coming up now. Okay, so how do you actually talk on the frequency? So, well, there is something called ICAO English, which basically is a list of words, phraseology you should use on the frequency. I mean, I think all of you have listened to Real ATC on YouTube, and you have seen that not everyone sticks to that. Use your common mind, common sense, and follow some basic rules. So, for example, you depart in Munich. Tower then hands off you to München radar, and he will say Lufthansa 123, contact München radar 123, decimal 9, bye bye. Yeah, and then you say Lufthansa 123, switching München radar 123, bye bye. So, and then what do you tell the controller? What is important? So, München radar, good morning, Lufthansa 123, 4,000 climbing flight level 70, and that's it. There is no need to tell him the star at the SID you're flying. There's no need to tell him that the weather is very nice, that FC Bayern has won the last game. No, nobody needs that. There are some phrases. Well, I mean, you can use them, but it always makes us laugh a little bit. Stuff like Lufthansa 123 with you. Well, you are already on the frequency, so we know that. When you get a squawk, Lufthansa 123 squawk 2374. 2734 in the box. No, I mean, come on. Cool American airline pilots may do that, but don't be this guy. I mean, you're a flight simulator in the end, okay? So don't be the cool guys. Yeah, don't tell the story of your life. I already mentioned that. And there are some positions or stations where you will get sent to with the phrase contact director, call sign only 118.7. When you then are on the frequency and do your initial call, you just say director hello Lufthansa 123. That's it. No heading, no altitude, nothing. When you hear call sign only, it's call sign only. And yes, be nice, include a greeting, that's okay. Same as monitor tower. When someone tells you monitor tower, you go on the frequency and you monitor. So you listen, you don't talk. That's especially, once again, very, very important on big events like Cross the Pond, etc. Please just wait. And if it takes 5 minutes, it takes 5 minutes. It also can take 5 minutes in the real world.
Okay. Can I just... so yes, very important, yes. Things like Heathrow director, Frankfurt director, and so on. It's very annoying if someone calls in, and I see this in real life from time to time. They just didn't listen regarding, call sign only, and they go, we're passing this, we're descending this, we have information this, we're an A320, blah blah blah, and the controller, you can see him getting so annoyed because he has to do like 3 voice calls already, right? So he's getting way behind. So that's very important to listen to that. The importance, if you're not being told call sign only, so if you do a normal radio call, so why is it important to state your current altitude or flight level? Kleptrick, from your side.
Yeah, so I mean, why is the current flight level important? Well, maybe you put in a wrong QNH, maybe your altimeter's broken. I mean, I have a readout of your current altitude, and maybe that doesn't correlate with what you see. So the current altitude is very helpful to find any differences.
Yeah.
And the climbing is also important because maybe someone, the other controller, did a mistake in the flight strip and put a wrong number in. So these two values are very important to check that it's still everything is going on normal.
Okay, and that's, for example, say you're climbing up, you're in a high-powered aircraft, and your radial altimeter is going very, very crazy climbing. So how close to the actual altitude do you have to be when you report? Let's say you're at 4,300 feet and you're climbing fast. So how important is each 100 footstep for the controller?
Well, not so important. I mean, a good example is the 777. On VATSIM, at least, they normally don't derate a lot. So, yeah. Let's say it's more important for VFR, to be honest, especially with all the airspaces. We will talk about this later as well. I mean, a rough estimation. I mean, I normally say passing 4,500. It's, once again, also not so good phraseology, but...
No. It's important to say, if you're still on QNH, obviously say altitude, passing altitude so-and-so, and climbing flight level so-and-so. Also, please try not to say, and I hear this in real life from time to time, we are out of flight level, or out of 4,000, climbing to flight level 220. Leave out the 2, right? Make sure you only say 2 if you mean the number 2. That's very, very important.
Yeah, there's a nice Pilot Edge video where they fly into Seattle, and the controller says Lufthansa 123, turn left to heading 220, and both the pilots are what? No, you shouldn't have used 2. Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. 220. Okay, yeah. So what exactly? So yeah. So try to be very, very also very strict on your phraseology. Right. Don't try to be cool, just like Kleptrick said before. Don't try to be cool. The frequencies are not there to be cool. They're there to be professional.
Yeah. I mean, if you are professional on the frequency, we realize that you are a cool pilot. You don't need to use fill words. So what I learned in my ATC training is basically every fill word is a bad word because it just takes time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry, Captain Dogstar. Yeah. So when you come on the frequency, I normally wait 3-4 seconds until I do a transmission. Yes, there's always a chance that you step over, but don't come on the frequency and immediately transmit, because maybe there's a gap because the controller gave an instruction and is waiting for the readback. So yeah, please listen carefully, and also don't jump in. So even if a pilot takes 10 seconds to reply, don't be that guy that jumps in, requesting clearance. No. Take your time. I mean, if you are so stressed that these 5 seconds really matter, I don't think you can really enjoy your flight in the end anyways.
Also, if you have a question, don't call in and post your question straight away. Give the controller a chance to decide when he has the capacity to answer questions. So what I would do is just say my call sign and say request. And then the controller can say standby, or he can say go ahead with your request.
Exactly. We will talk about this later. That's very important for VFR. But yeah, that's also good.
All right.
Yeah. What helped me a lot in the beginning, I have some notebooks, field notes. No commercials, please. I already filled 20 of them, and what I do for every flight, I write my call sign on the top, and then write everything down that the controller says to me, like my clearance, the ATIS, the departure, and also when I'm flying, I'm constantly writing down all the time. I mean, nowadays I don't do it that often because, I mean, you're getting used to remember stuff, so you get a good short-term memory, but in the beginning, that's so important. Write down everything. Even a fast clearance, you can write down with some tricks you can learn, like maybe leave out some stuff, just that you remember. It's so annoying when pilots so you tell them cleared Rokil to 6. Say again, cleared Rokil to 6. Say again. Stuff like that. So write it down, and then you always have it in front of your eyes, and you can just read it. Yeah. Very, very, very important. Learn the NATO alphabet. it's so cringy when someone says cleared cleared Anchor 5N, Nordpol, SID or stuff like that. So just learn it. It's not very long. Fun fact, we also have in German, we have a similar spoken alphabet. I don't even know that, but I know the NATO alphabet. It's very, very helpful. Also, that also relates a little bit to this 220. Use some special words. For example, there's no 9. It's always a niner. There's no 3. There's a 3. That also helps, especially with the bad quality of voice. I mean, also in real life, that's why they do it. So if you have to climb flight level 350, say climbing flight level 350. So basically like the plant, the tree. Sounds weird, but it helps a lot. Be patient. I can't stress this enough. Always think about that. We as controllers, that's our hobby. So I'm sitting here, I don't get any money, I just do that for the fun, basically. And there's nothing more disappointing than people telling you off on frequency, oh, why is this taking so long? I'm waiting since 20 minutes, blah, 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 blah. I mean, maybe they have a point, yeah, but still, hey, come on. There's no need. There's this nice video from Zurich, from the real pilot that explodes on the frequency, swears like a madman. And that wasn't real life. That's so unprofessional. So
yeah, I absolutely agree. That is, when I hear that, it just, I feel embarrassed for the profession. If you have a problem in real life, I'm just referring to real life. If you have a problem with a controller, you can get his number, you can call his supervisor and talk to that person later on. But never ever discuss stuff like that over the frequencies. Yeah.
The last point, don't take it as granted, like it's a last resort. But for example, when I give a clearance via voice, which is quite long, and then I hear say again, I basically explode inside because I always ask, okay, what part did you didn't get? Yeah, just the flight level. Okay, then please ask for the flight level and don't let me repeat the whole clearance because it takes another 20 seconds. So that once again, use a pen, write down, and then please ask specific questions and don't use say again just because you're lazy.
I would like to actually disagree on this one because I want to put the say again always as ask for say again if you are unsure about anything, because it's always better to ask say again the whole clearance even. If you just don't get one part, then do a mistake and ruin the controller's airspace completely.
Okay. Yeah, as I said, it's a very it really depends. Yeah, I also agree with you on that, but yeah, as I said, I mean, try to write down everything as much as you can. But yeah, please don't use it all the time just because you missed one piece or stuff like that. I'm a Lindley.
Also very important is don't forget to get patient. Also ATCs need his time to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty. Okay, let's Malindley, if you be so kind, could you please mute your microphone?
Someone's singing in the background there. Nice. Someone's singing in the background. There we go.
Thank you.
I just did it.
Okay. Sorry.
It's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So we covered a lot of stuff already. Most of that is IFR. I quickly want to tell you a little bit about VFR because it's amazing. Flying VFR is great, and even on VATSIM it's even greater. So if you never flew VFR, give it a try. It's so much fun. Of course, a lot of things changed there. It's also once again really depending on the country where you fly. So I will give you a rough estimation. How it works in Germany or Europe, but as again, if you really want to go into VFR, please be sure to read about the special procedures in every country. Yeah, so why is VFR so great? Well, with some limitations, you can fly where and how you like. oh, there's the Zugspitze, like the biggest mountain in Germany. Yes, fly 5 circles around it. Yeah, nobody cares. Just do it. Do you want to follow this river to a city? Amazing. Just do it. You can do whatever you want. It's so cool. The limitations are basically the airspaces. So, for example, in Germany, everything above flight level 100 is so-called Charlie airspace. At bigger airports like Frankfurt or Munich, the Charlie airspace ranges until the ground, basically. At one point, you will meet the Delta airspace, which is basically the area around the tower control zone. But yeah, you can just fly around it. So normally you are in airspace Charlie, which is basically everything in Germany minus the last 1,000 feet above the ground. That's a different airspace. But yeah, so let's say 1,000 feet above the ground until flight level 100, you can do whatever you want. As long as it's safe, of course. There's some special things on the Alps. The Charlie airspace ranges to flight level 130. So you can fly even higher without talking to any controller. There's a cool story. So in Germany, the speed limit in Echo airspace is 250 knots. In Charlie airspace, it's Mach 0.9999, so below the speed of sound, of course. But so on the Alp area, you are above flight level 100, but Charlie starts at flight level 130. Well, that means that in this 3,000 feet, you can basically fly as fast as you want, as VFR. So what you could do, you can get into a jet, fly to this area, and yeah, just do whatever you want there. You can try it out, just some small thing. If you fly VFR, you have a different squawk. So in Europe, it's 7,000. So just put this in when you fly VFR. In the US, it's 12,000. No, 1,200. Also, when you're not on a frequency and just flying along IFR on VATSIM, you can squawk 2,000, 2000. As a VFR, you don't have an SID, of course not. For example, you filed a flight plan from Munich to Nuremberg, and your routing includes the mic NDB. So normally the controller, you don't have an SID. So what's really important to know is the so-called pattern. The pattern is used for departure and for landing, or if you just want to practice touch and goes, for example. And this pattern contains of some parts, let's say. So the first part is called upwind. When you then do a left turn, you're entering crosswind. Another left turn, and then you are the downwind. Then left turn base, and then you turn on final. So I just said left, 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 left. Yes. When you do a right thing, it's called a right crosswind, a right downwind, a right base, and final. When a controller clears you downwind, he always means the left one. He explicitly will say right downwind or right base. Also keep in mind, and that's something I only know for Germany for sure, is every time when you fly VFR in the pattern and you want to do a right turn, you have to listen for the words right turn approved. If you don't hear it, you have to fly straight ahead. So when you fly right, you need to wait until you hear the magic words right turn approved. Let's say you want to fly patterns in Munich. So let's say this is runway 26 left, so you depart. So a controller will basically tell you like that. After departure, join downwind, runway 26 left, wind 240 degrees, 6 knots, runway 26 left, cleared for takeoff. So he cleared you to downwind. But actually what he did, he cleared you for the whole pattern. So even he said downwind, you can fly until final. And then you can fly as low as like your gear almost touches the ground already, and then you have to go around if you're not cleared for land. But you're cleared in the whole pattern. So you can decide on your own when you turn base and when you turn final.
Yeah. Just quickly jump in here. There's been a question regarding landing clearance. So what if you don't receive a landing clearance before touchdown? Do you have to go around or can you land?
Well, I mean, we handle this in real life. You have to go around, of course. You're not clear to land, so go around. I would ask. I mean, to be honest, I also already forgot 2 or 3 pilots and didn't clear to land. It shouldn't happen, of course. But yeah, you're not clear to land. Of course, you have to go around, yes.
Yeah. In real life, it would be the same unless, of course, you have an emergency. Then I would take emergency authority to look at the runway. If I can see the runway is clear, then I would land, but only in emergency. Otherwise, it's always safe to go around.
Yeah, you can always go around. Yeah, so this is the pattern. Grab a Cessna 172 and fly some patterns. It's a lot of fun, especially with a lot of traffic. So in Munich, we quite often have some VFR traffic during our online day on Wednesday, and it adds a lot of fun. I mean, be prepared that you will maybe have to fly some circles or orbits to give way to the IFR, but it's a lot of fun because you're so slow, and yeah, it also spices up the mix for us a little bit. It adds some interesting notes here and there. As a VFR, you can also fly some specials, which I really, really like. One is, for example, the ILS Practice Approach VFR. What the hell is that? So basically, that's a ILS approach under VFR conditions. So you have to maintain VMC, so you're not allowed to fly into clouds. And then you can fly a normal ILS approach. So you request that on Tower, and then Tower will send you to the approach controller. And then you get headings and altitude as IFR, but we always say the following. All headings and altitudes are recommendations. Maintain VMC all the time. So basically, it's your responsibility to tell us, okay, there's a cloud. I can't fly this now. But then also keep in mind, you should also only do this if the weather is good. And then, as VFR, you can fly an ILS approach, which is a lot of fun. You can do a so-called Charlie crossing. As I said, like on the bigger airports in Germany, the Charlie airspace almost goes down to the ground, and it looks like a funnel. So you have flight level 100, and then in different steps, getting narrower and narrower, this Charlie airspace ranges until above the airport. And you can fly through it if you request it. It's a so-called Charlie crossing. So you're flying VFR in airspace Charlie, you're contacting the approach controller, and now we could actually talk a little bit about the VFR thing. So you want to do a Charlie crossing, you go on the frequency of the approach controller, and then you say, München Radar, hello, Delta Echo Charlie Oscar Mike. And there it ends. Because as VFR, you have to wait until the controller has time for you. And then, as the controller will say, Delta Echo Charlie Oscar Mike, München Radar, Servus, go ahead. And then say, yeah, Delta Echo Charlie Oscar Mike, we are Cessna 172, 2 persons, request Charlie crossing from north to south. And then the controller will tell you, okay, active runways, 26 left, 26 right, QNH München 1014, crossing Charlie airspace approved between 5,500 and 6,500 feet from north to south. So you have to read back all of that. So he gave you the active runway, the QNH, and give you, I don't know the English. As a VFR, you normally don't get a fixed altitude. So you don't tell you flight level 800.
Yeah, it's a block altitude.
Sorry?
It's a block altitude.
Block altitude, okay. So he basically tells you, okay, you have a range 5,500, 6,500, and in this range you can fly. Keep in mind, as VFR, you always have a 300 feet variance. So you can actually fly higher and lower of that, but keep it in the middle. And then you can fly through Charlie airspace above a super busy airport, and it's just amazing when you see all the big planes land there, and you are in your small Cessna and just cruising along with a ground speed of 120 knots. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, VFR also includes some different phraseology. It's more for like how to depart and stuff like that. You don't get a clearance, of course. So you basically call in and say you are ready for taxi. Then you will get your taxi instructions, taxi to the runway, and then really important, you maybe are at the holding point of the runway, and then you think, okay, I'm ready. Why is the controller not telling me cleared for takeoff? Well, you have to tell him you're ready, because you may have to do a run-up or stuff like that. So when you're at the holding point, you've done your run-up, you're ready for departure. You say München Tower, Delta Echo Charlie Oscar Mike, holding short, 26 left, intersection Bravo 10, Bravo 10, ready for departure. Never, ever say ready for takeoff. If you're ready for departure, you're ready for departure. The problem is if you say ready for takeoff, somebody could confuse it with cleared for takeoff and stuff like that. So that's also important. That was just a small introduction into VFR flying. If you are super interested into this topic, we can extend it. There's a lot to learn. It's a lot of fun. So I highly recommend that you try it out.
Okay. We can, we'll take that for a later date, because I've done some VFR flying on Pilot Edge, but never ever on VATSIM. So I remember that our VFR group flights are actually really popular, and so I think at some point we can actually combine that with flying on VATSIM and VFR.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just read in the chat visual reporting points. Yeah, that's a concept also most common in Europe, not in the US. So stuff like we can discuss them on a later date. There's a lot to learn, but as I said, it's a lot of fun. Okay, some random stuff. Often on VATSIM you hear monitor Unicom 1228 bye-bye. That basically means, okay, there's no controller online anymore. You're now in uncontrolled airspace, and 122.8 is basically a text frequency where you announce your stuff. So for example, if I depart in Nuremberg and there's traffic around me, I write EDDN traffic, departing runway 28 at Nuremberg. Just that other people are aware of, so you can use it as like to coordinate your stuff a little bit better. In the US, they normally tell you monitor advisory. I don't know why. That stuff doesn't exist in the real life, by the way. There's a Unicom in real life, as far as I know, but it's more like a guard frequency thing. But yeah, on VATSIM it's 122.8. Keep in mind, when there's no ATC online, there's no wrong or right runway. You decide what you want, but please use common sense, especially if there's other traffic. Write them a PM on VATSIM or coordinate on Unicom. Make it fun for everyone. Keep speed limits in mind. I mean, I know the FSLabs puts this 250 limit below flight level 100, but that's not always the case. So Charlie airspace doesn't have a speed limit, so you can actually fly faster there. Just keep this in mind. Sometimes it's weird for us controllers when planes suddenly abruptly lose speed and okay, flight level 100. I see. But check the, yeah. Okay.
A quick question regarding Unicom and the text message there. Is it really required, or is it just polite?
It's so if there is 50 miles around the airport, you are the only one. I don't write there. It just clutters the chat. If there's someone in approach, yeah, then it's not required, but then it's nice, yeah.
Okay.
As per the code of conduct, it's not required, but if you see some, usually you like have this little game like plan in your head, look at the VAT spy, see if there's other traffic around. If there is, then it's usually a good idea to communicate with each other, but you also have to keep your eyes open because some other pilots might not communicate, so it's a little bit of a mess sometimes.
Yeah, the only thing I find kind of disturbing is, well, yeah, let's say it's disturbing, is when I'm flying in let's say Nuremberg, and I'm reading someone writing that he's in approach in London, right? That's something, that's that. Like I said, it just clutters everything. So I would say, yeah, it might be code of conduct, but try to use common sense. If you are the only one at the airport, yeah, then I would just not do it.
Another helpful thing is plan your descents thoughtfully. So for example, if in Munich you have to fly the transition, it will add a lot of track miles to your route. And if you plan your top of descent based on that, you basically almost, you're in the upwind of the airport and still on flight level 350. Always descend in a way that, when coming from Unicom, I should say, that it's like the shortest route to the final. If you're then lower, yes, you need more fuel, but keep in mind that we maybe give you a shortcut as a controller, and we are more likely to do so if you're already low enough, because if you're too high, it takes forever. So just keep this in mind when you do your descent planning. Once again, a highly discussed topic, emergencies. My point of view is the following. If I have a professional pilot that can handle his plane and wants to fly an emergency, even without telling me, I'm all in. Like I flew on engine failures myself on VATSIM, medical emergencies, aborted takeoffs, and so on and so forth. All of that is more than welcome. At least I can only speak about Munich. But you have to do it professional. Yelling on the frequency, Mayday, 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 dual engine failure going down. Yeah, well, okay, log off. Sorry, not interested.
What?
Keep in mind.
Really?
Yeah, really. No. So based on the code of conduct, a controller can tell a pilot to either stop the emergency or log off.
Yeah,
that's allowed.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time I accept the emergency, but once again, if someone yells Mayday, Mayday, Mayday and freak out, sorry. But if someone says, yeah, Lufthansa 1234, right engine failure, declaring emergency, bam. And then he got priority. Everything else has to wait. I will start holdings, and that's a lot of fun. I really, really like it. But keep in mind, you have to handle it professionally, and then I'm more than happy to do so. Yeah, don't fly to Innsbruck. Well, it's a nice airport. It's amazing. The problem is everyone thinks it's a nice airport. Everyone flies there. The airport can't handle that much of traffic, and the problem is most of the pilots don't even know how to fly Innsbruck properly. The problem is that a lot of arrivals into Innsbruck cross the Munich airspace, so we have to bring them down to a certain level. It's just annoying. There are so many great airports with way more interesting approaches than Innsbruck. Yes, Circle to Land 08, amazing, ooh. But that's basically what annoys me the most about VATSIM, this Innsbruck hype. Yeah, it's really just about the pilots that can't fly there.
Okay.
Sounds a little bit grumpy.
Yeah, because I'm like, okay, because I advertise Innsbruck quite often, or people, a lot of streamers go into Innsbruck because it's so interesting to fly there. But from your point of view, it's because of you have to handle that traffic. Is that correct?
Exactly, and the problem is that a lot of pilots don't know how to handle Innsbruck on a professional level. I've seen 747s landing in Innsbruck. A flight from Munich to Innsbruck in a 747.
Oh God!
And then when I ask them, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Yeah, it's just for the lulz. I know it's not realistic, but I don't care.
Okay, so Onkel Dismasker said quite correctly. Well, just do it offline. You don't need to do it on VATSIM if you want to go to Innsbruck.
Yeah. I mean, don't take this note too seriously. Fly to Innsbruck as often as you want.
Yeah, but keep it sensible for one.
Yeah.
And make sure you know the procedures. And
exactly.
So practice the procedures offline, and once you're confident, then you're happy to do that on VATSIM as well. Let's put it this way.
Okay, and if sometimes it's getting over the top, I was intercepted by a fighter pilot once. People talk badly on the frequency, whatever. There's always the .wallop command. It basically connects you to a supervisor, and then they will take care of it. Use it when it's necessary. Don't overuse it. Sometimes, if you have questions, you can also use it. You can put it in the chat, .wallop, and then a dedicated chat will open. Alrighty, it's already taken quite a bit, but I will continue quickly. Now, I quickly want to talk about virtual ATC, so what I am doing and Nikrativ is also doing. So basically, when you become a controller, you have to follow a certain training path. When you decide you want to become a controller, you basically just sign up at your designated country, and then you receive a rating called S1. With this rating, you're basically a student level 1. Then the people will take care that you start to learn all the positions. So you normally start with delivery, so giving IFR clearances, then move on to apron and ground to handle the ground traffic, and then tower. When you are on tower, you do a so-called controller practical test. So two very knowledgeable controllers will listen to you for 1 hour and basically rate you on that. And if they say, okay, you could handle the traffic, you use the right phrasology, and so on and so forth, they will grant you the rating S2. So you see, as a pilot on VATSIM, you basically have to do nothing to start flying. If you want to be a controller, you actually have to do quite a lot of work and dedicate a lot of time there. The next rating is then called S3, so you're basically an approach controller. Once again, if you want to reach this, you have to do another controller practical test. The next one is then C1, and then you're a center. Then your training is basically over. Then there are some other stuff you can achieve. C3, which is like a senior center controller. That's another test which is a little bit longer and overwatched by more people. And if you are a very knowledgeable guy in your dedicated airport region, you can also gain instructor ratings, which basically tells that you know a lot about all the procedures and so on and so forth. And then there's also the supervisor rating, SUP. When you see such people, just run. No. These people are like the admins of VATSIM, and they will help you if you are in trouble. Yeah, so basically you have to choose a FIR. FIR, if you want to start training in Germany, we have these 5. So you can either go, for example, to Munich, and then you control on these 2 airports. Berlin has Tegel and Schönefeld, Hamburg, Düsseldorf, and Frankfurt. So these are basically regional groups with like 20 to 70 members, and you then get trained on this airport and can control there. And here's once again is the flow. So you do like a delivery, ground tower, the first controller practical test, then you train for approach, do your test, then center, do your test, and then you're done with your training. I'm currently holding an S3 rating approach controller. I'm currently training to become a center controller, and yeah, so far it took me almost 2 years to do that. You can do it faster, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication into this hobby, and I'm also really strict to myself. I want to know all the procedures. So for example, what you have to do when a plane dumps fuel, there are a lot of procedures you have to learn, and then you have to know them by heart. But that depends on everyone, how crazy he wants to go on this hobby. For me, it's just a lot of fun to make it as real as possible.
Yeah, and just to add, so there was just a German FIRs, but of course that's global. So if you are unsure about what's your area, or actually you don't even have to start controlling the country that you are from, you can start controlling in any country. Just search for the division that the country that you want to control is part of. So for example, UK is its own division, and then Europe has their division, VATSIM, and that covers like pretty much most of the European countries. Some of the Eastern European countries might be in the Russian division, but still, just find the EUD and you will find all the information that you need, pilot-wise, controller-wise, and all that. So.
Yeah. So of course, I mean, the best thing, choose the airport that's closest to you. I live in Munich, so a safe bet for me. If you're thinking about becoming a controller, have any questions, just hit me a PM. We can talk about this in detail if you want, or even Nick Retiff, as I said, he got me started into ATCing 2 years ago. Quickly,
just one more thing I want to say. Just this is my own opinion and recommendation, but there is some countries that have really long queues for ATC right now. You've been talking about it on the chat, and what I've seen on VATSIM sometimes is that people are like going and get their ratings in somewhere else and suddenly just leave that area, so they are wasting the mental capacity in that area. Just if you can, don't do that, because it will just people mentor for their free time. So if you want to start controlling, dedicate for the area that you will get mentored, because that will give the best reward for the mentor as well. It's not really rewarding if you mentor someone and suddenly they just leave for another country after they get their rating. Just wanted to get it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone wants to go at triple and so on and so forth. Yeah. find something nice, maybe something small, start there, meet with the people. It's really cool. We'll talk about this later. So yeah, quickly wanted to show you how our software.
Oh, no voice at the moment. Daptrick?
I got disconnected.
You did? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, we'll just wait a few seconds until it reconnects. Yeah. So people have been asking regarding today's group flight. Yeah, it's going to start soon. Oh, yeah, there he is. He's back. So it's going to start soon after the presentation is finished, and we'll talk about it in a few seconds. Okay, Kleptrick, there we go.
Yeah. So the Euroscope from Nikrativ, for example, looks like the real thing they use in Finland. That's more like the standard look. So just to quickly show you, here we have our like departure list. There we can see flight plans. Here are the airplanes. Here you have like the so-called text. So here you see the call sign, the type code, and stuff like that. So that's what we use. Robbie just posted how it can look. So you can heavily customize it. This program is free of use. It's a little bit overwhelming in the beginning, but if you get used to it, it's actually quite useful. And they use it in Hungary to train the real controllers. I don't know how it ended up to be the client of VATSIM, but yeah, I really like it. It works. To add for the text pilots, that's all we see in text. So if there's a lot of text, we always have to scroll there up and down. So maybe that's also adds a little bit to the understatement of why we don't really like a lot of text text pilots at the same time. Okay. Yeah, just some random stuff about ATC. Yeah, so it takes a lot of time. As I said before, I started September 2017 and currently at S3. What is really cool, you learn a lot about aviation, also like how ATC works and how airplane works, more in a sense of how they perform and stuff like that. What's super useful, and I've seen this in my job, you learn you can multitask like a pro, really. Like when you're controlling and it's really busy, you really have to split your dedicated time on various tasks very efficiently to don't get overwhelmed. And that helped me so much also in real life, like for my data job. I'm a software developer, just doing a lot of things at once, but still like keep focusing on various tasks. So that was super helpful for me. You got very stress resistant. When you have 30 planes on the frequency, there's nothing else that can shock you in life. You've seen it all. It's a lot of fun if you have good pilots and they do what you want. I mean, if you are able to separate like 5 planes on the downwind with a 5-mile spacing, yeah, it just looks cool, and it's a lot of fun if it works. You meet a lot of cool people, like in Germany, some controllers are real pilots flying for various airlines or business jets. We also have some real ATC people, so like they do this as a job, and then also in their spare time they're still controlling, which is quite crazy. But yeah, I mean, if it's fun, I mean, Blackbox basically does the same, so that's very, very cool. You can lose a lot of real-world procedures, which could be helpful for a PPL. So for example, if you are good at communicating on the frequency, that might help you when you do it in the real world. And you can tell everyone you're a virtual air traffic controller on a network called VATSIM, and everybody that doesn't know about it will look like that you are crazy. We once were sitting in Nuremberg. We had a real life event there. So at the airport, we were controlling, and people ask us if we're controlling the real planes outside.
Okay.
That's what we did in Corsair a few years ago. There was like a wedding in the bar, and they were like asking what do we do and why we were here. And we just said we are pilots.
Nice.
They were just like super confused, like they were asking all about the planes, so we were just answering them all the questions because we knew all the answers. So it was just kind of hilarious.
Yeah, and that I really like. I mean, I like in my group of friends, and none of them actually flies the simulator or stuff like that. But still, everyone basically has questions about aviation, and it's cool to answer them, to know a lot about that. So yeah, it's an awesome hobby, even if you're just flying. But ATC is also very, very cool. Okay, wow, I didn't expect it to take that long. So are there still any questions left?
Yeah, so either via voice, if you like, or via text. Right. So yeah, I get asked quite often why, if I'm a real world pilot, why do I still fly simulators? Like I said, it's become so fascinating how well these simulators are actually working these days on the PC, how well they're modeled. And it's the same, I guess, for the ATC side. Like Klepcher said, the feel of the being interactive with people that actually then flying the planes, right? That you have on your screen, the interaction between the two services, and so that's really the main motivation, of course, for us here to do these workshops, to do advertisement for VATSIM. And again, the immersion just becomes so much greater, so much better if you are using an ATC online.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it's busy, like when you're using an eye traffic package, well, the planes just depart. They don't care about you. But when you are basically part of a real big ecosystem and flying with a lot of different people, it's a lot of fun. Airbus Fan DK, how do you know when to turn on transponder? Well, that heavily depends on the country. In Germany, for example, you turn it on when you enter the runway. In the US, you turn it on when you start your pushback. Sometimes it's written in the ATIS, sometimes it's written in the controller remarks, squawk mode, Charlie on ground. In Munich, we prefer to turn it off, to don't see the planes anymore, because we use a round radar plugin for Euroscope. So we also simulate that. But yeah, it heavily depends on the country, and I just don't have a rule of thumb how to do it.
Yeah, basically my rule of thumb is that if you are basically unsure, then go ahead and use mode 3 on ground, because if they don't have ground radar, they are not simulating you, then they basically wouldn't be able to tell if you are or Charlie. So yeah, that's just my point of view, but it doesn't really, if the controllers, they might say that mode Charlie on ground, but no big deal, just turn on mode Charlie, or if you are using mode Charlie on ground and you shouldn't, then it will turn squawk standby and just turn it standby and no big deal again.
Exactly, yeah. Lindley, has anyone flown VATSIM USA? Yes, I fly there quite often. It's a lot of fun. They are very, very professional, especially on the bigger hubs like JFK, Los Angeles, San Francisco. I also fly a lot of VFR there. It's completely different than in Europe. So yeah, I would highly recommend also flying there. Once again, it's a lot of fun. Does it compare with Pilot Edge? Yeah, it's sometimes even better, because you have a lot of controllers, not just one, which you hear all the time. But of course, it's not guaranteed that someone is online. So that's the difference. Okay. Anything else?
All right. Well, if there are some questions coming up later while you're doing the group flight with us, yeah, just post the questions here on Discord, and I will pass it on. I know that the controllers, when we fly now, going to be very busy. So don't ask questions over the airwaves. Of course, if it's clearance related or something like that, then of course do ask. But otherwise, if it's general questions, then just post them here. I will leave the chat open here for today, and then we can answer those questions. Klepchik, if I post the routing, is that the routing today that we can expect from Nuremberg to Leipzig? Because that's what SimBrief has just given me.
Where did you post it?
On the workshop questions page.
Yeah, that looks good. Yeah.
Airbus Fan, VATSIM procedures are very close to real life, but of course there can be some differences to real world procedures. That's just the way it is. But again, flying on VATSIM, on the PC sims, it's a hobby. So yeah, don't take this as professional. Although I have to say, when I fly on VATSIM, I am amazed at how professional the controllers are. And again, it gives an amazing amount of immersion. And so yeah, definitely, again, I can just say, don't worry. Jump into the cold water and learn. Everybody's been there, starting with the service, and the learning curve is very steep. You will become proficient very quickly. And again, once the new voice codec comes out, it'll get a lot easier again regarding communications.
Yeah. Robbie, sorry, Captain Dogstar. Yes, you can, in your remarks of your flight plan, you can write something like VATSIM beginner or first flight or stuff like that. We normally check this and then also change our behavior a little bit towards newbies, yeah. There's no problem with that. All right. Well, so now we can do the club. Whoever wants can join the group flight, Nuremberg to Leipzig. I want to thank all of you that you have joined. Pretty amazing that so many people showed interests in my and our hobby, flying on VATSIM. So yeah, I hope this was helpful for you. And yeah, once again, thank you for taking part.
Yes, let me say a big thank you to Kleptrick for taking the time. I know he's spent a lot of hours preparing the whole workshop today. Yes, absolutely amazing. And hopefully we can have you back at some point in the future for another workshop, in order to get as many people here, enjoy the passion on VATSIM.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you very much.